Today we have my father with us, and we're going to be talking about some world events and maybe some politics, and maybe he's going to give us some advice on his thoughts on things and maybe some good advice on how to handle things in this day and age and things like that. So, did you look at the questions I sent you, Daddy?
No, I looked at kind of a long paragraph of things you're interested in.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that is
quite extensive, I'd say.
Yeah. So I figured if we touched on a few topics that if it got too long, I could just break it down and turn it into different sections for my channel. Okay, so the first one,
Sounds good.
let's see. Well, I guess we could talk about what's going on right now. That is the biggest topic, which is the fires, right? Because we have family out there in the fires. What is your thought on these fires? Like, how do you think they started, and do you think they can be contained?
Well, I'm not really sure about the detail there. I just realized that the world is becoming warmer and weather changes and winds and droughts can bring along a lot of fire potential. It seems to be happening, and I suspect that this won't be the first of it, because I don't think the world's going to get any colder or any wetter. I think it's just going to keep getting more extreme. So I don't offer much encouragement to people who live in some of these arid areas around the world. It's I think it's not just North America; it's around the world. We're seeing drier weather, hotter weather, wreaking havoc with agriculture, food supplies.
Yeah. Well, what's your thought on what's happening globally other than the fires? Like, for example, China having all those floods, and there have been some extreme amounts of locust insects, swarming over Africa for months now, and just different things like that. Do you think it all has to do with the climate change along with the fires, or do you think that that's something that
it's hard to say. I really not a scientist. I can only guess that something's going terribly wrong in terms of our ecological balance in the world, and it's having effects on everybody, and comes down to having the large effect on humanity and humans, because we depend on a balanced natural world, and it's not happening. So it's going to be a difficult time over the next 50, 60 years.
What would your advice be?
In order.
What would your advice be for people who are maybe not prepared, or maybe they don't know how to get prepared, or maybe you can't get prepared at all? I mean, what's your advice on that? What should people maybe think about doing as far as trying to help themselves?
Well, I think it comes down to local neighborhoods, local states and countries really taking a close look at their own situations and coming up with their own solutions. I'm wont to suggest solutions for others. Obviously, there's some variety in terms of resources and and the impact of some of these changes. So I just think it takes more local political will as well. And so people have to express themselves to the powers that be in some effective way that isn't violent,
Mm-hmm.
so that reason can reign and humanity can be served, because humanity is suffering. And the suffering is going to increase.
What's your thought on George Soros and the Antifa and the violent, I guess, gang destruction of those protests? Because that is confusing to people. Um, People are not sure if maybe the Democrats are, involved in the activity that are more violent in the protests, or if it's just Antifa. And there's been some insinuation that George Soros has something to do with all of that for whatever agenda that he might have. What's your thought on that?
I really have no thought on it, no information, and
Okay.
it's difficult to get news that's not biased in some way. So that
Yeah.
we just have to hope that the people who live in those areas get more politically active
Do you
to
feel
bring
like
about some change.
Canada is as censored in their world news and media as the United States is?
Canada is kind of a different place in a lot of ways. Its politics are simple and fairly straightforward. Um, Obviously, we do have some influence on politicians, but from the big money corporations, that kind of thing that happens in the States, and in many countries, but probably less so in Canada. And there's more accountability in Canada because the way the parliamentary system works, it works on the basis of opposition having a voice. And I think America's having a difficult time listening to each side. It's very polarized, which makes it difficult to come to a consensus on solutions. So, there's no easy answer to any of these questions.
Mhm.
It comes down to people beginning to be more human with each other, more compassion for the suffering of others. It's really calling people forward to be their best selves.
Yeah. What is your thought on the Federal Reserve? Because a lot of people don't really understand what that is and how that works. And there's been some, I guess, kind of discussion about whether there's actually um, money there, or they just print money that they don't really have. They're just, and the banks are just kind of duping people as far as all of this loan money, kind of like selling people houses, just to kind of enslave them into, working for the dollar until they die, and to keep putting the money through the machine or whatever. It's kind of weird. I figured you would know about the Federal Reserve and how all of that works. So I figured, since you're an economist for so long, you can kind of put some insight on that.
Yeah, I think the main thing about the Federal Reserve is it tries to mitigate some of the recession qualities of the economy, so that things like investment aren't discouraged, and home ownership is encouraged through lower interest rates. Like, they try to do a job that balances the economy's health. And in this situation, the economy is more and more in debt with the COVID expenditures. It's going to be a very long and difficult road to rebuild the economy. So I think the Federal Reserve is doing the best that it can.
Okay.
to balance a very complicated situation.
Um, well, I remember you telling me when I was younger that you didn't really appreciate how the gold standard or something like that was handled in the United States, and you decided to switch governments and work for the Canadian government. Can you shed some light on that? I always thought maybe
Well,
that had something to do with the
I,
federal.
I think it's I think it's kind of interesting that all of the money used to be gold or silver, going back 100 years or so. All we didn't have paper money, so it was real. So the government kind of stepped up and said, "Well, we'll we'll give you a promissory certificate, but it isn't. It's just a promise to pay. It's not a. It's not. It's like giving everybody clamshells, and you can trade these clamshells for whatever you want. It's it doesn't have that much intrinsic value, but other than the promise to pay, promise that it'll be recognized. It's built on promises rather than actual gold and silver.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I guess I have another question. I've heard recently that the 1% of the people that own 99% of the nation's wealth, at least in America, are doing very well because of this pandemic that we're having right now, and are making multitudes of extra income, while the majority of the American people are sliding downhill and scrambling to try to figure out how to survive in these times and in the future. What's your thought on that? Is that accurate or no?
Well, it's accurate throughout all of history that the rich protect their own. Kings, barons, um, it's just the way the system seems to be working, and it's not fair, not equitable, not just, but it serves the interests of the wealthy and the elites, and this has been going on for centuries. Nothing new here, and the only thing that changes it, historically, the only thing that changes it is some kind of disruption, either a war. There was a lot of disruption after World War II, and a lot of equalization happened. The rise of the middle class came about because of World War II. Education after the war, all these GIs and soldiers came back and got college. A lot of them got college degrees. The world changed. In other words, the power structure was disrupted. That became more equal. But now we're approaching another very unequal time. And the only thing that's going to change that, in my view, two things. One is a series of pandemics, because this is only the first, well, not even the first, but this is the first serious one of magnitude, and there'll be more in the future that disrupt the power structure. Also, the climate change. Everybody's going to get hotter, including the rich. Water is going to become scarce. Drinking water is going to become scarce. Um, it's going to be time for change and equalization and being more human with each other, because we're going to be all in the same boat, so to speak. It's uh, it's time for a change.
What is your thought on how technology is moving so quickly into artificial intelligence and, for example, the self-driving cargo trucks and the 5G phones that are and towers that are going up that need shields for people so they don't get hurt by the radiation and things like that. They're selling these little shields you can put on your phone, supposedly. And I've seen people, put some posts up saying that the trees are dying near the towers, and there have been insinuations that media is trying to get people ready for artificial intelligence more by putting out movies and TV shows with, a lot more robotics and things like that. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, I really don't know how this is going to turn out. It's a bit of speculation on that. And I know that anyone who uses a cell phone is prone to radiation. You're always advised to keep a cell phone away from your body about, I think it's half an inch or so or more. I mean, everybody knows that there's radiation involved in Wi-Fi and cell phones, that kind of thing. Mind you, it is a low level, but still, it is radiation. It's really hard to say what the long-term effects of some of these newer technologies are. Artificial intelligence is intriguing partly because of Hollywood, with the Terminator series and the robots taking over the world kind of thing. But
Yeah.
I think it's fantasy. I think that humans will always have the control, using it wisely. But then again, it's like anything new, anything can be used for good or bad, good or evil. So we have to raise our consciousness level in terms of goodness, because there are forces in the world, dark forces. So we have to be aware of them, and we have to bring forth the powerful angels of the right, angels of the light,
I agree.
to bring light to the darkness.
Well, what's your thought on the current situation with immunization? Because people are pretty apprehensive, I guess would be a mild word, about Bill Gates and his idea of the immunization, and whether this pandemic had originally been intentional in some way or had been man-made and leaked out of a lab accidentally or intentionally. And people are worried because they're scared of what it is he wants to inject into them. And he's made quite a few statements that he would like to depopulate the world, that there's too much population in the world, and he doesn't have a very good track record with kind of using his immunizations in poorer countries because they've had some, deaths and bad effects, sterilizations and things like that. So, and myself included, I honestly am not planning on getting the immunization. But we have other family members that are thinking in the opposite direction. So, what's your thought on that?
Well, I think I hesitate to criticize others, so I'm not going to do that. But I would like to say that immunization is an individual choice, and there have been side effects from all kinds of immunizations. In fact, Congress passed an act years ago to compensate the damages from Pertussin shots, because many of them got seizures from the shot. But the Congress recognized that and offered compensation. So
But
there
we
is a
don't
history of
but we don't have compensation for this. We don't.
We don't currently have that in the law any longer. That was years ago. But
so
there are side effects. There can be side effects for sure. I think
compensation. Yeah, and I agree with you. I think it should be an individual choice as well. Like I said, I choose not to, but we have other family members that are waiting for it. But I feel like there are a lot of people, not just in America, but in other countries that are worried that they're going to be forced to have something injected into their body. What's your thought on that? Do you think that would actually happen or no?
Well, I don't know the answer to that. I mean, every country has its own way of doing things. Yeah, the human body is definitely vulnerable, and side effects have happened. So, yeah, I can't prescribe one way or the other on something that hasn't been developed yet. But
yeah, I heard that
it's hard
usually
to
it
know.
takes about 10 years for them to develop a good vaccine normally. Do you think that they're going to be able to actually come up with something sooner than that?
I don't know. I just remember years ago when Dr. Salk developed the polio vaccine, and it was in a sugar cube, not a shot.
Mm-hmm.
People lined up. I remember lining up to get my sugar cube. Never got polio, thank goodness.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty painless way to do it. I think there was a lot of acceptance of that in those days, and it was quite effective. But again, you have to have a lot of trust, don't you?
Yeah, I think trust
You're
is
not
one of
going
the
to get
big
side effects.
issues.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Yeah, I think that I think even for myself, excuse me, I feel like if I could trust the government or trust the people that were offering the immunization, that I would say yes to it. And I think maybe that's a big issue with a lot of people is that they don't feel like they could trust the government or the people that are
Mm.
offering the immunizations. I
Yeah.
think it comes
I
right
think
down to trust.
this particular pandemic is in some ways worse than polio. The actual pandemic is devastating to many people, and certainly a vaccine would be welcome if it's truly tested and effective. But that takes years. It takes more than a year anyway. It takes a lot of trials. And,
I always seem to, my voice goes out after I've been talking for about half an hour. I need to drink water or something.
We should both learn some sign language. Maybe that would do it.
Yeah. Let me look at my list and see if I forgot something here. What's your thought on, I guess, preparing long term for, I guess, food and health and water and things like that? Do you have any advice on that? Like what people could do now to
Well, I think it would take a sea change in our political system to do what's right. There'd have to be a real sensitivity and compassion for the whole world to take place to fulfill a vision that I might have where the wealth of nations is shared with everyone on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
We are basically on a round spaceship hurtling through space right now. The Earth is a spaceship. Basically, we're sharing the air, we're sharing in this closed spaceship.
Yeah.
We're sharing everything here except we don't share.
Yeah.
And we lost compassion for others. So it's a mess. It's a real mess right now. And people are suffering is just going crazy with the world's becoming more and more painful for people.
Yeah.
Situations it's right now we have extremes. We have the polarization of people instead of the unity of people to address all of these issues.
What do you think causes that? What do you think causes a majority of people to be more
Well,
self-centered?
I, my feeling is that it takes a long time for people to grow up, to get past the infant narcissistic stage where the world revolves around the individual person, and the individual person is all that matters, and self-serving actions become predominant, and the loss of compassion in uh, that approach, where the solution is for people to grow up. Growing up is not easy to do. It takes, first of all, it takes terrific parents and parenting and love. And often those early stages of development haven't been encouraging enough or loving enough. So we get people that become adults who aren't really grown up. So they can't deal with some of these issues responsibly and with compassion and caring and love. So here we are.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not an easy world, for sure.
Yeah. What do you think drives? This is just I'm asking for your opinion because you probably don't know the absolute answer for this, but what do you think drives the small minority of elite human beings to be so selfish and so destructive when they have so much wealth that they could actually fix the entire world if they wanted to? I mean, I don't understand that as a human being myself. Do you have any insight on that?
It's mostly it's mostly what I said earlier, that you really have to have a larger view than your own backyard, your own place, and your own self. You need a larger view and compassion for the world and others around you. And for some reason, we've lost some of that, quite a bit of that. Sometimes money becomes more important than people, and when that happens, everything goes sideways, and we're in
Well,
a mess.
do you have any advice, I guess, for people who are wanting to do something to change things? Because I think sometimes people think, well, it's only me, I'm just one person, or what can I do? Or no one will listen to me, or, I see all this stuff going on around me. What can I do? Do you have any advice for somebody or for, the people that are watching our show, our video, anything for
The
them?
most I can say is to be true to yourself and true to your dreams. If you want things to change, you'll have to do it. You start with yourself. Start by knowing who you are, knowing your heart, reaching deep inside, knowing your suffering, developing a love for yourself and compassion for yourself that can extend beyond yourself to others. You do that, and the world will change.
That's good advice. I like that. I'm just checking my list to see if there's anything else I wanted to ask you that I'm not thinking about. What's your thought on children having the cell phones and the iPads and the computers? Because I've noticed that nowadays um, it's pretty mandatory in the classroom, even with the really young ones, that they do everything by computer. So they all have these Google laptops, and you're allowed to have your cell phone in the classroom now. And I've noticed that younger people, especially, are having a hard time being able to put down the cell phone or the iPad or the computer. And there seems to be, at least in my view, a lot of people who are having a really hard time knowing how to live life without looking at the black screen. For example, feeling like they're too anxious or extremely bored, or they just can't figure out how to be happy in life without that. What's your opinion on that, and with especially for the younger ones?
It's really difficult to answer that because of the COVID restrictions on getting together with others. Their social contact has been impaired.
Mm-hmm.
Friendships have been impaired. So it's really difficult to answer that question, other than for really young children um, to have really boundaries over the amount of time they spend in screen time, for their health and for their physical bodies, because they have to move around and play and keep their bodies agile and healthy. And if you're too much time on the computer or the cell phone or tablet, impairs that ability. So it's really a parental obligation to balance that carefully and with good boundaries.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. Um, let's see. Are you noticing any patterns with conflict between countries and politicians right now, and the way they're handling their communities, um, that you have seen in the past in history, or that you know about in history, or is this all new?
I think to some extent it's new. I've been around for a few years, and certainly there was a lot. I was around during World War II in the 40s, and certainly there was a lot of unity then, obviously, to to somehow bring balance back to the world. Um, and the 50s were a time of freedom and change, music primarily, and other ways in terms of growing the middle class. But things began to be noticed in the 1960s with calls for racial justice, justifiably so. And you began to see resistance to unwarranted wars like Vietnam. And I think there was divisions in those days too. Um, I think the divisions now are somewhat extreme in the States. I think primarily we've seen somewhat of an autocratic leadership from some I would call mishandling of power, so that there's a lot of division rather than unity coming forth with national issues such as the pandemic, where there should be unity. Um, yeah, I don't. It's not a happy situation in the States right now, for sure.
Yeah, I've
Uh,
noticed that it doesn't seem to have affected Canadians quite as harshly, at least from the Canadians and people in our family that are up there that I've talked to. But I guess they're experiencing it in a different way. You guys are
yeah,
experiencing it.
don't have the extremes in Canada that we have in the States, so it's less violent in Canada. The States is becoming more violent, and we'll have to see how that how that can be somehow resolved, because violence is not a solution, a lasting solution for anything.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Do you have any advice that you have been thinking about that maybe you can share with everybody on any of those topics that we didn't cover already?
Um, just that I think we have to look outside of ourselves more and see some of the beauty in the world. Like if you're passing a tree, for example, you might want to say hello. We do have a natural beauty still in the world, and
Yeah.
it's there to enjoy and honor. That beauty is alive, just as we're alive.
Mhm.
So it's, I don't know if you realize it, but we're made up of atoms, and guess what? Everything else on the earth is made up of atoms too.
Yeah.
You can't really avoid it.
Yeah.
You may not realize, I want to admit that we're just recycled atoms, but that's what we are, physically anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a bit of humility in that. It's like, but yeah, just look more deeply and more broadly, and see the world as a special place to be. And let's do what we can to take care of it, and take care of each other.
Yeah. I like that. I did just think of one other thing I wanted to ask you about. So there's been some talk about uh, a cashless society, and that possibly governments are working towards having no cash and everything just be, I guess, electronic. Um, what's your thought on that for people that don't want to be involved with that? How could they survive that? And how do you think that would affect the people that are in positions where they can't have access to electronics and other income, where they depend on people giving them cash, like on the streets and things like that? What's
Yeah,
your take on that?
it does feel unfair, particularly at a time like this when we have so many unemployed and so many in poverty. It doesn't feel like feels like too much control over the system and not enough freedom for people. There may be a time 100 or 200 years from now when that would work out. I'm not sure. Depends on how balanced we can get everybody and really help each other.
Do you think that if some majority of people, or maybe minority of people in different areas of the world, didn't want to participate in that, that they could maybe get by bartering and things like that, or maybe not? What's your take on that? Maybe there's no way around it.
Would no, there's always an underground. There's always underground options, but they're not necessarily available to everyone. So there would be people left out who would be suffering. I think it all comes down to suffering. There's so much suffering in the world, and we have to realize that. And I know every one of us has some level of suffering. We all do. So as we learn to deal with and acknowledge our own suffering, we can then be compassionate to others who suffer.
Is there anything that you wanted to add to our talk today?
No, I think I've said just about everything in my in my opinions and my insights, that kind of thing. But
Okay.
I just wish the best for everyone, and I want everyone to know that whether or not you realize it or not, we're all connected in some way or another, and let's just do our best to recognize that and have compassion.
Yeah, I like that. I agree. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with everybody today, Daddy. I appreciate it. Thank you for coming today, brothers and sisters, and I look forward to you visiting my channel again. Don't forget to leave a comment, give a thumbs up, and subscribe. Salam. Okay, I'm ending the broadcast now, Daddy.